Hey there, folks. I'm Mark, in affiliation with Spectrum Pulse, and I think Billie Eilish is the only story this week I want to acknowledge. And it's Billboard BREAKDOwn.
I don't remember.
Hey look, a holding pattern week in between album bombs that nevertheless is busier than you would expect, where any possible changes will fly right out the window and you question how much any of it matters by next week. But okay, nihilistic ramblings aside, Beyonce is getting that album bomb next week with very little competition, and the album's got a lot of songs. It's probably going to make quite the impact, and thus it's kind of tough to assess how much anything here is really going to last. Well, except for our top 10, where for another week, About Damn Time by Lizzo held its lead by a thread at number 1. And make no mistake, it's a margins game where she won on sales and the radio, wherewith As It Was by Harry Styles at number 2, it held the lead on streaming, but couldn't quite make it up anywhere else. I'd say this makes them all vulnerable to Running Up That Hill by Kate Bush at number 3, as she beats them on both sales and streaming, but the radio margin's the issue here, and it's not like she's going to make enough ground up quickly. Now this comfortably strands First Class by Jack Harlow at number 4 with his radio and freefall, but he's got enough of a built-in margin there and in streaming to not fall off that quickly, where Wait For You by Future, Thames and Drake at number 5 is consistent streaming managed to compensate for a wonky radio week. But let's be real, the next story is Break My Soul by Beyonce at number 6. She surged on the radio, the sales are there, and while streaming hasn't fully gotten there, the album bomb next week will nearly guarantee another number 1 hit, although it might be closer than some might expect. Speaking of the radio, that's also the reason that Late Night Talking by Harry Styles is up to number 7, which allowed it to jump over Mi Porto Bonito by Bad Bunny and Chencho Corleone at number 8, which never really built any radio it needed despite ruling streaming. But this takes us to a return to the top 10 that I could have predicted but didn't want to see. I Like You, a Happier Song by Post Malone featuring Doja Cat at number 9, thanks to the radio push that will not die, and a streaming pickup thanks to the video, which actually means this crap might stick around, especially as it jumped over Heat Waves by Glass Animals at number 10, of which the radio isn't getting rid of, but it's just getting overtaken. And on that note, our losers and dropouts. Couple of big ones in the latter category, because while Flower Shops by Ernest featuring Morgan Wallen fell short of the year-end list, it was a tough week for Ed Sheeran, as Bam Bam with Camila Cabello clinched its year-end list spot leaving this week, as well as Bad Habits, where after over a year on the Hot 100, it fell below the top 25, and it's gone. And hell, when we go to our losers, Two Step with Lil Baby fell to 68, it's likely to fall short of the year end as well. Outside of that, See What I'm Saying by Moneybagg Yo lost at 89. Silent Hill by Kendrick Lamar and Kodak Black slid down to 87. Love Me More by Sam Smith just never took off at 84. And Massive by Drake has somehow stuck around, but it's now stuck at 81. Now on to our gains. We didn't get any returns this week, and somehow this list is even more barren, albeit in the wake of what's coming. Again, it's going to be tough to gauge how much any of these pickups here really matter. But Free Mind by Thames got a boost off the debut to 77. Best Thing Since Back Roads by Jake Owen got a boost off the return to 72. And Last Night Lonely by John Party saw a considerable spike up to 40, which you can probably chalk up to Nashville radio throwing a lot of support behind the song. Whether or not it'll last, we'll have to see. But even then, we did get a decent number of new arrivals here, so let's start off with number 98, Bzrp Music Sessions Volume 52 by Bizarrap and Quevedo. You know, I shouldn't be surprised that this eventually crossed over, but I kind of am. Bizarrap is an Argentinian producer and DJ who has in recent years become known for hosting the Bzrp Music Sessions and Freestyle Sessions. It'd be as if Funk Flex was charting his guest freestyled Say-Side, until you actually remember he did actually have a few minor hits in the late 90s. Anyway, I've been familiar with these guys because they chart globally all the time, these Bzrp sessions, normally placing high before dropping off the next week. But this is actually an exception, sitting atop the worldwide Global 200 for its second straight week through the collaboration with pop rapper Quevedo. And I'm not going to call it great, but I get why it works and it blew up. The shuffling groove, the synths that sound yanked straight from the early 2010s as Quevedo drops his baritone into auto-tune crooning, complete with the stutters, but featuring a trap breakdown amidst the relatively generic party lyrics once you translate them. I mean, it's certainly catchy, it's going to work for a late summer vibe, but it's hard to shake that this isn't so much of a hit as a moment that's probably going to fade pretty fast, especially stateside. I'm not going to complain about it, just doesn't do a lot for me. Number 97, Are You Entertained by Russ and Ed Sheeran. I can't tell you how much I was dreading this one. The last thing anyone needs is Russ getting any shred of legitimacy, and putting him on a song with Ed Sheeran is a fast track to the mainstream. But what might be more alarming, the song's actually kind of decent. Yeah, Russ is by far the worst part of this, bragging about retiring your parents and making my homies my staff members. It's just clunky, especially given how his flow and melody's a flagrant J. Cole ripoff. And the compression all over this mix from Fred Again really doesn't help it pop off. But I will say the Gladiator sample is distinctive, the trap hook's pretty slick, and Ed Sheeran once again proves that he's a better rapper than he's any right to be. Yeah, it might all be just a pretty disposable flexing song, but I've certainly heard worse in this lane. I actually didn't mind this. Unlike number 94, Vette Motors by YoungBoy Never Broke Again.
I be with the mass man, and they all unheard of. 187 just spin me a 70. Christian be stepping, they know it's a murder. This fit unheard of.
Okay, I'm conflicted on this one. On the one hand, it's more refined than YoungBoy's been throughout the majority of 2022. His flow is sharper, it feels less sloppy, the mixing off the piano and the more spare percussion feels cleaner, and even if YoungBoy is very obviously cribbing vocal melodies from Kodak Black and Young Thug, he's still just off-kilter enough to make them his own. Unfortunately, this is YoungBoy in brand name flexing mode, which has never been interesting, and this is no exception. At least until we get to the final refrain where he talks about peeing on diamonds, which even if I know what he's referring to with yellow diamonds, it's never not gonna sound gross, rappers. Now, I've heard so much worse from YoungBoy, but I think the greater frustration is that it's not interesting. And considering there was a time I was rooting for him to really try and experiment, I just wind up exasperated, and for some strange reason disappointed. Next, number 91, Love Lost by Mac Miller.
Now you're gone. All I got is this damn song, so I can feel, but I can't touch. You said my love was a bit too much. Broke my heart, can't find no crush, so why don't you come on back home?
And this is just awkward. An old Mac Miller song from 2011 that charted thanks to the mixtape getting re-released on streaming, and as someone who's never really been a Mac Miller fan, even after he passed, I was preparing for the worst here. But let me reassure you all, this is not bad. Mac Miller has always had a loose, breezy charm that's easy to like, and I really like the production, riding a liberal sample from the Temper Trap and some really nice percussion build across the verses. It's a nice touch there. The problem I have is how the song wants to have a lot of its sensitive relationship sentiments, but also Mac Miller flexing post-relationship, spending a lot of money and sleeping around, and the juxtaposition just feels kind of off to me, especially with the very low-key production. It's implying he's deflecting from the pain that he's really feeling, but the motive punch just doesn't really coalesce. Mac Miller just sounds way too self-assured on that hook. Look, I get why people like this. I'm not complaining it had a brief resurgence, just that it never quite clicked. At least for me. Number 90, With a Woman You Love by Justin Moore.
Don't need to look no more, cause you finally found it. No, forever just ain't long enough with a woman you love.
I'm always a little bit surprised that Justin Moore isn't a noisier presence in country. And for the record, that's actually a compliment, considering how much I used to despise this guy about 10 years ago. Maybe his bigger name's just attracting more of my ire. Maybe it's because his conservative politics seem to have gotten tempered with age. But hey, Justin Moore's now back with a song that's generally okay. Speaking about how now being married with all daughters and doing the stuff for the women that he loves that he wouldn't have done years ago. Now, there's still problems with the song. The groove is non-existent, the guitars feel kind of weedy, Justin Moore still doesn't have the greatest presence, an attempt to ramp it up on the final chorus is not remotely impressive, and let's be real, this is far from groundbreaking stuff, but hey, Justin Moore seems to get that, and if making wife guy country is his version of boyfriend country given his age, it's honestly too inoffensive for me to get all that worked up about it. So yeah, this is fine. I don't have any issues. Number 79, The 30th by Billie Eilish.
But I told you even then, you look so pretty.
I guess I shouldn't be surprised that Billie Eilish dropped a single with an A and B side the old-fashioned way is basically a surprise this summer. She's always had her throwaways, and considering their usual high quality and diehard fan base, she was bound to get a lot of attention for it, with both sides charting this week. Now this is the B side, and yeah, pretty great. A spare acoustic song with touches of piano where Billie Eilish describes a car wreck of someone that she cared about and the moment of relief that came from that person surviving. And while Phineas's production remains atmospheric and perfectly balanced, and the bridge is an absolute marvel of a crescendo as the layers and harmonies begin piling up and ramping up that sense of panic, what I think I like most about the song is the ending, where it shifts from past to present tense, and you could tell with the benefit of hindsight and the doubt that the fear of that loss has lingered for Billie and still touches her now, which for someone making and performing songs like this, art about tragedy, it's one of the least discussed but quintessential points in how those emotions can stick around, be they healthy or not. So yeah, call it a B-side, it's still excellent. Unlike number 65, Progress by John Rich.
I'll be just fine. Stick your progress where the sun don't shine.
You know, at a different time, this could have debuted in the top 40. Or higher. Hell, the time could have been just last year, but Billboard carefully tuning how their sales are being tracked. I mean, I'm certainly sick of talking about these songs because the grift is old and played out even by now. The last time I even talked about John Rich was 2019 with his single Shut Up About Politics, where the hypocrisy even annoyed the conservative side of country music critics, especially when the music's not any good. So now there's this, where the most notable line is, "Stick your progress where the sun don't shine," and it's followed by vague anti-immigrant waffling, complaining about pipelines getting shut down, asserting that Americans were left to die in Afghanistan, even though Biden was the one who ended the war there, and a bunch of freedom fighter nonsense that was played out years ago. As a Canadian, songs that played at such baffling bargain barrel talking points of being anti-progress are just mystifying, and the subtextual obsession with anal sex is really kind of funny. But I will say the actual music here isn't terrible. The fiddle's really nice. The song's trying to go for a brighter neo-traditional vibe, but that might actually be a bigger problem because the song's got no groove or power or credible anger, especially with John Rich's increasingly thin-sounding voice. It's too sanitized and weak to kick any ass, being sold as taking the high road, and yet it just kind of comes off as pitiful. So yeah, the song sucks. Obviously. But I want to drill into the sentiment of wanting to be left alone. You'll get along just fine. And considering how much in recent years the John Rich types of the world go out of their way to attack immigrants, women, disabled people, folks of color, and gay, trans, and non-binary people, maybe y'all should leave them alone instead. Leave progress to the folks who actually want it. Put in the work for it, of which you're often the passive beneficiaries. Or, take your own advice. Shut up about politics. You're not good at them. Number 55, Pressurelicious by Megan Thee Stallion featuring Future.
She pressurelicious and I crave.
Take a picture of my bag, now these bitches press to get it. Take a picture, shake my ass, now your nigga press to hit it. Pressurelicious.
Am I the only one who thinks this combination doesn't make a lot of sense? Yeah, Future's the major name, big cosign for Megan, but their attitude and presentation doesn't often have a lot in common unless Future is at his darkest or nastiest, and somehow I didn't expect it here. And, I mean, okay, the general toxic, horny vibe of the content kind of makes sense. They're dark mirrors of each other, even I think Future's sleepwalking through his verses. But again, that's the problem. There's this complacency to his delivery that just doesn't match Megan's sneering attitude, and the chemistry's not remotely there. And pair it with the spare ominous melodies, lockstep percussion, you get the feeling this is trying to create a much darker mood than it can really pull off. I don't know, between Sweetest Pie and Plan B, Megan's now 0 for 3 in terms of singles from this upcoming album in terms of tracks I really like. And while I don't outright dislike this, it's not moving the wheel. That's a problem. And finally, number 52, TV by Billie Eilish.
You leave them all behind. You tell yourself it's fine, you're just in love.
Okay, this is the A-side single. I completely get why, but I also completely understand and get the folks who like the 30th more and think it's a better song. Like that track, it's predominantly acoustic, building off some of the darker elements of Happier Than Ever, where it feels like you're stuck in the morass of an abusive relationship and are trying to reflexively justify it, if only to yourself. And the writing here is actually really sharp, thankfully describing a fictional scenario for her, but with a lot of lived-in details, such as the betrayals and gaslighting she'd rather see on Survivor than live through. The references to the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial juxtaposed with Roe v. Wade, where systems are weaponized against women by predominantly disingenuous conservative outlets, and then acknowledging the power Billie herself has within the spotlight, but also feeling like she doesn't have control even when she is on TV, where the outro highlights how the only person who can break out and fight back against the bad system, well, it's her. She can't just lie in stasis. So the message of the song feels potent as all hell. I really like the writing. I wish I liked the composition more. There's no real crescendo that hits as powerfully, and while I still think the writing is good enough to push this to greatness, outside of a wallow, the replay value is slimmer. But yeah, Billie Eilish is still getting both the slots here for the best, with the 30th at the top with TV as the honorable mention. As for the worst, yeah, Progress by John Rich is getting that, obviously. But this honorable mention is going to Pressurelicious by Megan Thee Stallion and Future. Yeah, I know, more in disappointment than being outright garbage, but bad chemistry and a weak composition will hold this back from being any better, and frankly, I'm starting to get worried about Megan here. Next week, though, it's Beyonce. Best be prepared for it. But until then, I'm Mark. You're watching Billboard Breakdown, affiliated with Spectrum Pulse. And I'll see you next time.